Alright, so today we're going to do an LS430 2000 to 2003. This is a manual gearbox application and it's going into a right-hand drive vehicle. So let's get into it. Right, so as discussed, LS430 2000 to 2003. This one is for a manual gearbox, so there's no automatic gearbox wiring in here at all. The ECU has been remapped obviously to become a manual as well. It is a completely brand new harness so that it brings all the ECU and everything into the inside of the vehicle. So what we'll do now is we're going to cut through to go through the build process so you can see exactly what that entails and what it looks like underneath all the heat shrink. So we'll be back in a second. Right, so now we're back again. So what we're going to do first of all is we're going to go through the entire layout of the harness and we're going to go through the wires on the plugs that the customer needs to fit into their vehicle. In this case, this is for you, Tim. So what we're going to do is, starting at the ECU end, we've just got the 3 plugs that are going to go into the main engine harness over there. You've got your 2 plugs that go into a separate harness that just plug into the fuse box over here. That's a completely separate harness, so that can be left behind when you want to remove the engine harness. Then we've got the plug coming out here, which goes to your OBD2 connector. We've got the customer plug over here, so that's all the wires the customer's going to connect inside the vehicle. And then we've got this plug over here, which then joins the main harness over there, and that supplies the powers to everything inside the main harness. Coming down along here, first thing we come to is the grommet. Now you'll see we haven't heated down or shrunk the heat shrink that's on there. We do that so the customer can actually move this grommet to wherever is going to be most applicable for their setup. Obviously these are going to all different vehicles, so it's much easier just to leave this loose so they can move it and get it in the right position. Following on along there, then we're going to get to our molded T-piece boot on the back here, and this is where the harness is going to split and go and do the little Y that it goes around the back and on the other side. So what we'll do first is the first breakout that comes over here is going to be an earth strap. So that gets bolted onto the M6 bolt over there. You'll see we have another ground coming out of here as well, so they both go onto that little bolt over there, and that's your earths for the engine harness there and for the coils over here. Then coming out here, you're then going to have your first coil, so that's going to be coil 7. So you'll see everything is labeled IGN 7 for coil 7. Then we're going to come along here, and then we break out sort of in the middle over here. Then we're going to go to our cam sensor for our left bank over there. We also break out for coil 5 and for coil 3 as well, and again everything is labeled so you can't get them mixed up. Then we're going to come further along here, and then it's going to break out at the front over here. Then we're going to have our oil control valve for our VVT-i on this one over here. We then also break out for coil 1, which goes over there. It also breaks out for the front cam sensor, which goes over there. Then you follow the harness down and you'll see that there is a little mounting point that you can secure the harness there. Then you should have clips here and here to secure the harness as well, just to keep it out of the way of any belts that are going to go over there. And as it comes down to here, then it's going to break out again. And here we have 3 little breakouts, and they're going to go through this little hole over here. And then you've got 2 that are going to come down here. Now in your case, because you are an LS430, this is how your oil filter housing is going to look. If you change it, this oil filter oil pressure switch is long enough to either reach here, or if you need to put like the LS400 one, which brings the filter back, you can also do that and just bring the wire out there behind the, where your air comp pump would normally be here. All right. So that comes down through there, and then you goes to your crank sensor, and in our case, because the LS430 goes down to the oil pressure switch over there. Then you've got this one that pops down, and then that makes its way over to your Lambda sensor, which goes over here. Okay, so that's all of that side done. So that's really straightforward over there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go around the back, and then we're going to carry on and work our way around there. So carrying on along here, We've then got our injector harness, which pops out over there. Now, I will put a link in the top there to take you to the video on how to install the injector harness. So that should be fine, and hopefully you can watch that nice and easy. Then we've got what we call the sub harness, because that goes underneath the intake, and that goes to your knock sensors and your starter solenoid. Remember, you do still have your thick cable that's going to come out and actually plug onto the positives of your battery terminal for the starter motor itself. As per normal, this has got 2 twinkle shielded cables in, so this can be upgraded to a Bosch wideband knock sensor if the customer ever decides to go with a standalone ECU, and we can build a patch harness because we actually have those ECU headers over there. All right. Then coming further along here, we're going to have another breakout over here, and that's going to be our earth for the coils on this bank over here. And again, that goes over to the 6mm bolt that's over there. Then on the other side of this breakout, we're going to come to coil number 8. And then that's going to go along and have another breakout over here, which is going to go to the cam sensor on the right bank. It's going to go to coil 6, and then it's also going to break out and go to coil 4. Then it's going to come a little bit further along there. So this can actually be held up here if you want with P-clamps. Over there, it can be held down here if you want to use P-clamps on the cam cover over there. It can work in both ways, so that's absolutely fine. Then at the front, it's going to come to another breakout here. Now here we're going to have our throttle plug. So that's our throttle plug over there. So that's going to go to the throttle, it's going to go there and there. So that's completely detachable. So you can take the throttle off without having to unplug the standard plugs on there. Then we're going to have the coolant temp sensor, which is just down in there. Now in this particular case with Tim, you're going to have the analog CAN converter to the Land Rover dash. So what we've done is we've actually fitted a plug on to use a Toyota single wire temp sensor. If you need help with that, just let me know. I'll get you a part number and send you a link where you can buy one of those. And that screws straight into that hole over there, and that will just plug directly into that. So that's no problem there. And then coming out on this side over here, we're going to have our oil control valve. We're going to have our coil number 2, ignition 2 there. And then we also break out, which then comes over here. Sorry, hitting the airbox there. And that goes to your mass airflow sensor. So that's plenty of length on there in case you need to fit it in a weird place. All right. Then we're going to come down along here. And then we come down, 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 and we have a breakout over here, which then goes over to our alternator sub harness. So again, that is so you can change alternators and we can swap the plugs around for you, no problem. And then the last section is the Lambda sensor, which comes down, and in your case it's just going to slide in there just like that. So that keeps everything nice and away from the exhaust, and so on and so forth. And then just remember, this is your main positive terminal for your alternator, so that's obviously going to go, depending on where your battery is, that's going to go to the post of the positive of the battery as well. Usually through a fuse, 120 amp is usually okay. 120, 140, that's what Toyota use for that one. Alright, so that's all of that. Obviously I've put the link for the video for the injector harness, but that'll obviously come through there and it plugs into all the injectors there. So remember, that's designed so you can pull the whole intake off without having to unplug any of the injectors, and you just unplug it at the back there and then you lift the whole thing up. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to come back along here. We're going to go through the wires that the customer, or in this case Tim, will have to connect inside his vehicle over here. Now what we've basically got is there's only 9 wires in there. It's very, very simple to use. But in this case, we've got some of the wires removed out of the system. And essentially, you've got a red 14 gauge wire. That's going to be your permanent 12 volt supply. So remember, not an ignition 12 volt supply. If you give it an ignition 12 volt supply, the ECU is going to reset every time you turn the key off, and it's going to make diagnostics very, very difficult. So that needs to be a permanent 12 volt supply. Then coming along, you're going to have your gray one. So that's your fuel pump. So in this case, we've got the white wire here, which is obviously running down to our fuel pump, which is in the canister over there. All right, then the major ones, obviously the red and black, or black and red, sorry, that's going to be your ignition 12 volts. So remember, don't connect that to accessory if you're using your ignition barrel, because if you do, then what's basically going to happen is as soon as you go to crank it, accessory cuts 12 volts, so effectively you're going to turn the ECU off every time you go to crank. So just make sure you connect that to an ignition, a 12 volt ignition source, and not an accessory feed, because otherwise that will then turn off when you crank it. Then we've got black with the yellow. That's a simple 12 volts connection for a starter. So again, you can get the 12 volts from your ignition barrel there, nice and easy, and that's all taken care of in the fuse box over there. So the reason this is so thin is it's all relayed inside the fuse box. So this is not actually going to the starter motor. This is just activating the relay over there. Moving along, we're just going to go through here. So we've got our green, our yellow with the green, and that's going into our little MPX device here, because we're using the IS200 dash in order to check all the instrumentation is working and all the signals are correct from here. Then we've got pink with a blue, that's your alternator light. So you'll see I've got a little LED in there at the moment, so that's going to imitate the alternator light. Then I've got yellow with a red. Now that's your check engine light, and in this case it's hooked up to the dash, so we can actually see the check engine light appear on the dash, and we know the wire is correct. We also have an LED in the fuse box, and that is also check engine light, and that's because sometimes you guys don't hook all this up. Maybe you want to start it on a bench or something like that. You can provide the 12 volts to the red, fuel pump via the gray, connect the ignition and start it, and at least we can see that the check engine light is on and that you know the ECU is physically turning on when you give it ignition. All right. Then we've got yellow black, and that's going to be oil light. So in this case it's going to our device here, and you'll see there the oil light is actually coming on, so we know that's working exactly as it should. We've then got yellow. So yellow is the tacho feed or the rev counter feed. That's coming from the ECU. That is a 4-cylinder signal that comes from the ECU itself. All right. And that's basically it. So those are the only wires that are there. The other plug that's in here is literally just for the OBD2 port. So there's nothing else complicated with that. There's nothing to wire up there. You're just going to leave that in place so you can plug an OBD2 machine and you can check all the live data and the codes and everything. All right, so now that that's gone through, the next step is we're going to do all the testing. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go back, we're going to get it running, make sure everything's okay, and then we're going to come back and we're going to do all the testing. So bear with me a second and we'll be back. Right, so now we're going to get on to testing, and I just had a thought that I didn't mention about the pedal plug. So that goes over there, and there's a 2-meter long harness that wiggles over there, and in this case we put the plug on for the LS430 pedal, but we've adapted it to an IS250 pedal. All right, so that's that. Now that that's out of the way, so what are we going to be testing now? So the first part of the testing is just by putting the ignition on. We're going to make sure we got all the lights right. So we've got check engine light, we've got oil pressure light, and we've got alternator light, because those are the signals that we can get from the harness. We're going to make sure that OBD2 communicates, so we're going to make sure we get live data through there, and then we're going to use this to test the fuel pump, because the fuel pump is controlled by the ECU, and I'll do is I'll put a link up in the top there for how the fuel pump systems work on Toyota and Lexus vehicles, so you can get a much more in-depth view of how that works. Then what we're going to do is we're going to start her up, and we're going to be testing things like the starter. So we want to make sure that when I give the black with the yellow wire 12 volts that the engine starts, then we know the whole circuit and everything is correct. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the ACIS valve over here, and that's going to obviously go down as soon as we start it up. All right, I'll put a little video in the top here about ACIS and exactly how that works and what it looks like all inside there for you. So that's a bit of information there. Then what we'll do is we'll go over to the dash and we'll make sure that the tacho is working. So this little device here is actually converting the 4-cylinder signal to a 6-cylinder signal, so it works correctly on the IS200 dash. Then coolant temp. Well, you can see already we've got coolant temp data showing over there, because the box is obviously live even with the ignition off for the time being, so that was all coming through there correctly. Then we'll test the drive-by wire. So all we're basically going to do is just press the pedal, make sure it works exactly as it should. Then I'm going to go into the machine and we're going to then test the 2 VVT-i solenoids to make sure that they are working, so we know VVT-i is working correctly. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around the engine, I'm going to pull out one injector at a time, and we're going to hear for the misfire, so we know that every single cylinder is firing exactly as it should. And then last but not least, because we remapped the ECU for a manual application, we're going to double check and we should have absolutely 0 codes. That will also be evident by the fact that we've got no check engine light as soon as we start it. And so yeah, we have also removed the secondary lambdas from the system. We're only relying on the main lambdas, which are used for fueling in this particular case over there. Right, so to start off with, we're going to put the ignition on. So it's really nice and simple. I've got my black with the red wire. Just going to give it 12 volts. And there you go. You can see we've got our alternator light on now. We've got our check engine light on the dash. We've got our check engine light on the fuse box, so that's all good. We've already got the oil pressure light on because that ground was going to the device already to turn that on, and we'll make sure it goes off when we start it. Then what we're going to do is go to the OBD2 machine, and these take ages to load, so I've already loaded it up for you. But what I'm going to do is go into function, I'm going to go into system select, and you can see that it's picked up as LS430. Okay, so we're going to go back into that, and then we're going to go look at the live data, so we can see that we're actually connected to the ECU and we are picking up information from it. So you'll see there we've got coolant temp 41 degrees, intake air temp 16 degrees, throttle position 15 degrees, so we know we're getting actual live data from the ECU there. Okay, now we're going to go to active test, and we're going to go into fuel pump. Now it does say fuel pump relay and fuel pump. If you watch the video that I put up about the fuel pump system, you'll understand exactly why that is there. But we're going to go into there, and as soon as I turn it on, you're going to hear the relay click, so I'll just do that. Hopefully you can hear the pump pumping away there, and then I'll just turn it off and you hear the relay go off there. Okay, so that is all fine. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move over to actually starting it up. Then we're going to start it up, and what we're going to do is we're going to make sure the starter works, nice and simple. We're going to then come over to here, and we're going to make sure the ACIS has actually closed down, so that we know it works as it should. We're going to go back to the cluster, make sure we're getting a tach signal coming through there. We're then going to, obviously the coolant temp's already working, so that's fine. And then we're going to do the drive-by-wire. And then what we're going to do is we're going to test the 2 oil control valves for the VVT-i. Then we're going to pull all the injectors out, and then we're going to come back and make sure we got no codes. So I'm just going to go through that because it's going to become very loud when I start the engine up. But here we go. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3. Alternator light out, check engine light out, oil light out. Okay. We can see that that valve has gone down, so that's good. We can see that we've got a tach signal over there, and it matches what we've got over there, so that's good. Coolant temp, obviously we already know. Drive-by-wire. Okay. Now we're going to come over and test the VVT-i solenoids. Going to kill the engine quickly, and we're going to put the ignition back on again so we can go into the OBD2 machine, come back in there, and we're going to go over to trouble codes, and you'll see nice and neat we've got 0 trouble codes. So we've got no trouble codes for any of the automatic gearbox, that's been fully remapped out. We've got no trouble codes for the secondary oxygen sensors, those have been completely remapped out. And obviously I've been starting it numerous times and letting it up to temperature without disconnecting the battery, so it would have stored any codes that would have been in there. Okay, so that's all done. She runs nice and sweet. So what we'll do now is, Tim, we're going to get this off to you. We're still waiting for the Land Rover device. Obviously where it's coming from, we're having a bit of problems getting it in, but it's not going to be a major issue. So I think what we'll do is we'll get this harness off to you so you can get everything fitted inside your vehicle, get it all started and tested, and hopefully by that stage the other device will come, and then we'll fire that over to you. All right, so if anybody has any questions, please feel free to comment down below. You can also find us on Facebook at Phoenix Engine Management, and you can send us a message there if you have any specific requirements you'd like to talk about. If there's anything specific about this harness you'd like information, again, contact us in the same places. But Tim, let's get this all boxed up and off to you. And for everyone else, thanks for watching, and we'll be back soon. Cheers, bye.